The Secrets of Technology is brought to you by the StarQuest Production Network and is made possible by our many generous patrons. If you'd like to support the podcast, please visit sqpn.com/give. You're listening to The Secrets of Technology. Hi, I'm Dom Bettinelli, and you're listening to The Secrets of Technology, where we discuss the technology news that's important to you from a uniquely Catholic point of view. And joining me today on the panel is Pat Scott. Hey, Pat.
Hi, greetings and salutations.
Folks, I want to tell you about another show on the StarQuest Network you are sure to enjoy called The Secrets of Star Trek. You can find it wherever fine podcasts are found or at sqpn.com/Star Trek. So, today's main topic is an interesting one that was provided by our very own Jack Barazini. I asked for some suggestions and he threw this one up there, and it's kind of interesting because it's one I hadn't dug into a lot. But the topic is AI art generators, and you may have seen online somewhere in a lot of people's either Twitter threads or Facebook threads, these strange pictures, usually in grids of 4, where there's a prompt, you know, Elvis as Santa Claus, Pope Francis playing soccer at the World Cup, you know, like these weird things. And then this strange artwork that looks kind of surrealistic, depicting the art from these prompts that are made by these AI generators. And there's a few different ones out there. And I think the most famous one right now is called DALL-E, DALL-E, you know, like Dali, the Salvador Dali, but also Wall-E, the robot. So that's a sort of mashup of those. But there are others out there, the Crayon and a couple others. And what they're AI generated artwork. I think it's generative artificial intelligences. And they don't just do art, they also do words, the written word. They'll do texts. If you give them a prompt, they'll write out a text. So there's some questions that arise over this sort of thing. Pat, have you seen these? Have you played with these at all?
I hadn't before Jack sent out the stuff. The only thing I do remember is Stephen and I were entranced for a while by something that was called deep dreaming, I think it was.
Uh-huh.
It was an early attempt at this, and it was really very surrealistic, very trippy.
Yeah,
almost looked like somebody maybe just transcribed their dreams.
Yes, and
that was kind of what it was for.
Yeah, well, and that's what they say is that these are still very early versions of this. These AI models or machine learning models is maybe a better way to describe them. They're still very primitive, but yet they can come up with some amazing things. I've been playing with one called Midjourney lately that works through a Discord, and you go in and you type /imagine and then your prompt, and you can be very detailed. I did one that I said, knight in shining armor discovering a treasure chest full of secrets of technology in a fantasy castle. And then I said ultra realistic. So you could say in the style you want it in. You want it in cartoon style. You want it in Picasso style. You want it graffiti style. So you can even give it a style, and it comes up. It'll generate 4 different images and then you can tell it, oh, do more, like make that one more, upscale it, like make it bigger and more detailed, or do variations on that one. And you could really kind of dig into it. And, it's interesting. This one it makes some pretty interesting stuff. In fact, I think I'm going to use for the cover art for this episode one of the images that it generated, because it's kind of funky. It looks like a 1970s sci-fi novel cover. If you've ever seen those,
like an Andre Norton.
Yeah.
Or something.
They're kind of often trippy and wild. So there are questions that come up about this. There are various questions that come up. One of the questions that is raised is are these systems, these AIs, these creative AIs, are they stealing other people's art? Because in order for them to work, they have to be trained on artwork that's already out there, and they take, every you can find in every museum book and every, picture online, everything you can find, and they feed it in to the machine, and it learns all about these different artworks, and that's how it learns to generate it. And so some people are asking, well, is it just stealing from all of these artists to create its art?
But artists have done that for years. I mean, you see people sitting in the Louvre, sketching off of others. I mean, this is a traditional part of art, is homage to other artists and their ideas, right, and making it your own, not obviously copying it. So right. I kind of discount that one.
Or even to go further, not even just like copying, but like even if you're making something new, you're still learning based on what every artist before you has done. You're not recreating painting from scratch by becoming right. an artist, or learning how to write, or playing music, or writing music. Music may actually be even better because, those chords, somebody invented that chord or that little trill of music before you, but you've used it in a new way. You've incorporated it into your art. So
yeah, there's only so many notes, where at least with painting and sculpting, there's a whole lot of more medium. So I would think that in the world of art, this would be less of a issue.
Now, another question that arises out of it is, who's the artist? The person who writes the prompt, or the AI that creates it, or the programmer who creates the AI? Like, who is the artist? Whose artwork is it? What do you think?
I feel like it's a collaborative thing, where it's like you walk into a library and you do some research and you pull stuff together. You're, I guess, standing on the shoulders of other authors. Mm-hmm. And the same thing here is, I figure it's a collaborative thing. One person takes the idea and it gets used, manipulated with some tools. And the programmer has some creativity in there too, but he's not actually there at the moment. Yeah. It's just his platform. So I kind of figure like it's collaborative, but then you say, who owns it?
Right.
Can I trademark this and put this can you trademark the one you came up with, or is it open source?
Well, and that's very interesting, because some of these AI generators, some of these specific systems, they specifically give you the right. They enumerate that you have the right to commercialize whatever whatever you get from the system.
That's good advertising too, for their system.
Right. And you're helping train their system. So all of these prompts is training it too. But it's also, it may be that they're giving you a right, not that you had that right to begin with, if you know what I mean. By the fact that they're telling you that you have a right to commercialize it, doesn't necessarily mean that you had that right to begin with. And I was thinking, like, when you talk about it being collaborative, some people might say, well, how is this different from, when you're walking in a park or like a square and you come upon a caricaturist and you give him the prompt and he comes up with the caricature from that, whose work is it? It's not really a collaborative work. I gave him a prompt, but he's the artist. He drew the thing. So in that sense, I have a role that I play, I guess, sort of a patronage role, like patrons of the arts. It's an interesting question. And can an AI be an artist? That's another.
Well, and it's almost a little bit like ghostwriting, where somebody ghostwrites an autobiography, which really didn't come from the individual who commissioned it, but it's still their work, because it's their life and they are the ones who are dictating a lot of it. But the writer then takes that and prettifies it and makes it good English and, all those things, and has a style. Whose book is it?
A lot of people may not know that a lot of autobiographies that you see out there on the shelves of celebrities were not written by that person. That person probably sat down with a writer who over the course of many hours in interviews, and they approved the drafts, and they made changes and things, but they didn't put word to paper.
But it may say Michelle Obama, or she may not be one like that who did that, but I mean, it may say so-and-so's life, my life by so-and-so.
Yeah. So I would say that's collaborative work, because it couldn't have happened without their participation, that they provided the life, although you can write a biography of someone without their participation, but they provided the words. They provided the basis,
the scenarios.
For the words.
Yeah.
So in that sense, they're also author. But can you have an artist or an author or creator who's non-living? And that's really an interesting question. And I know that people, including like many Catholic people who are sincere in their faith, come down on both sides of this issue. I know, like I've had this conversation with Thomas Sanuro before, where he feels like, machine learning and algorithms or AIs can be considered to be artists or creators, or at least sub-creators, in a way that we're kind of like sub-creators from God. I don't know. What do you think?
Oh, that's hard, because it's like, especially with artwork, it's like, I would be hard pressed to say. I mean, it's not really a soul, it's not really intelligence, but it is self-learning and self-changing. So it can be creative, and that's in the sense of it can do things based upon what it has learned, but
from
maybe
us.
not any initial new thought.
Right. It may be that it is a creator insofar as it is leaning on the creativity of human beings. It did not create itself, and therefore the people that created it, are the ultimate creators, source of its creativity. But it is a sub-creator. That might be true. You mentioned writing. There's another article. I'm going to link several articles from here, including a couple that talk about how you can use these different systems. But one of these articles, called "The Great Fiction of AI" from The Verge, the subtitle, "The Strange World of High-Speed Semi-Automated Genre Fiction." Now, there's this world that I wasn't aware of independent authors. And these are people who we used to call them self-published, but that has a bad taste of like vanity press, like someone who, had a big ego and printed a bad book because no one would buy it from them. No publisher would publish it. That's less so these days. It's that, like Amazon has made it very easy for people to publish books without having to go through the major publishing houses. And so you have these folks who are out there, independent authors, and there's a genre or a niche where they pump out a lot of books very quickly. They profile this one author, and she's in a very small, very niche genre, detective witch, genre, fiction.
Dresden.
Okay, that's a very niche genre, and her audience, she has this particular audience for her books, and she has promised them she would turn out a novel every 9 weeks.
Wow. Which,
like, now, folks, you got to realize in the regular publishing world, like if you have a favorite author who's writing a series of books, if they turn out a book a year, that's a pretty regular schedule. I really enjoy the works of Mark Greaney, who he's a big time military thriller author. His Gray Man series comes out every year in February, like clockwork. There are others like, say, George R.R. Martin, who do not come out like clockwork and take years to produce the next book. But yeah, now you got these indie authors who are expected to turn out a book every 9 weeks, and she talks about how difficult that is, and they interview others too, and how she uses generative AI to help her write the books, to get past writer's block, to come up
just deadline times. Yeah.
Descriptions. She says that for her part, she has made herself a promise to only use it to streamline things. How does she say? She would use it just for inspiration, no cutting and pasting the prose that it develops, that it generates. And that might be her, but that's not necessarily everyone. And in fact, if you go on Amazon, you'll find plenty of these novels that have been churned out by entirely by an AI, which you can tell because these things again are not that sophisticated yet. But it makes you wonder, is this good for us? Is it what, I'm not one of these people who thinks literature should all be high literature and we should all, have our noses in the air as we read our books. I have plenty of fiction that I read that is, pulp or whatever. But does this go a step too far? What do you think?
Well, one of the things I was interested in reading in that article was where the author actually came to the point where she said, I am no longer dreaming about writing. I am no longer feeling that creative urge because it somehow has slipped away from me. And so that's when she came back and put real severe restrictions on herself to say, I'm not... I'm going to limit this and I'm going to take my words, feed them in, come back and say reiterative, because she said she felt like she was losing her creativity there.
Interesting. And one of the pitfalls, too, of these AIs is they can only output what they've learned. So unless, so if you're writing in an area or a genre that has a lot of writing already in that area, like, say, magical realism, fantasy, sure. But if you get into a particular niche, a particular sort of thing, it's going to come out with some weird stuff that really doesn't bear resemblance to what you might expect.
Yeah, I thought that was funny too, where she was talking about how she's got magic in her stories, but because of what has been learned by the AI, when it would come out with it, they would talk about taking their swords out of their hilt and reseating them and stuff. She said, I don't have swords in my world, but they assume because it's magic, they're going to put swords in there.
Right, exactly. Yeah, I guess she's it's sort of what is it, magical realism. So magic in the real world we live in. And yeah, there aren't a whole lot of swords in that sort of story, but because
Chicago,
yes, one of my favorites is the Dresden Files,
right?
But although there are swords, but
yes, there are.
But because it doesn't know what to do with that sort of thing, and so it's still not quite the same, and it's fascinating, and I really recommend reading these articles. Because it's a fascinating look, and I kind of want to say I want people to have access to these tools, but I don't want them to become so used that this is that we rely on AI to produce this stuff, that it becomes like AI generated junk food. There's still a craft. This is a science that the AI is involved in, but there's still a craft. There's an art to this that
the creativity. We don't want to lose that. You don't want to, although there is nothing new under the sun, Horatio or whoever it was, but there's a creativity in the human spirit that learns to make new things in a new way that I'm afraid that this would, if it were overused, could suppress.
And there's something about the spark of truth and beauty in us that flows from the image of God that lives in us, in our heart. And especially if, as a Christian, we look at that idea as God's own creativity flowing out from us. And a computer can't do that, doesn't have that spark. And I don't think these things necessarily, they can show truth and beauty insofar as they reflect what they've learned from us.
Right.
But it's going to be secondary and removed from the first person truth and beauty that we are discovering and displaying in the world through this. So through our work. So yeah, it's I'm okay with authors having various tools to use to help them write books, especially if it means my favorite authors can get out their books faster. But I don't want these to become a crutch that gets used to produce lots of junk, and especially junk that clogs up the marketplace so that you can't find the really well-crafted stuff that's out there. It's very interesting, all this.
And as much of a science fiction fan as I am, and I have read so many things over my years, in AI, becoming self-aware and all of these things, there's a part of me that says, no, that's still that is fiction. That part can't happen.
Right.
Because there's no soul involved. There's not a granting of a soul through God. So, it's all a lot of fun to read, but there's a sticking point.
Data is still a walking, talking toaster, and that's
but he's still my favorite character. He and Spock are still my favorite characters.
Well, at least Spock is a flesh and blood person, so we give him that. But yeah,
that's true.
I like Data, but he's a fun toaster. Yeah, so,
he's a Cylon.
Yeah, right. Yeah, the Cylons are scary toasters. But yeah, I agree. Like I think and this came up in our discussion of that Google engineer who claimed that their AI had become self-aware. And I think that as it was said in some of those articles, science fiction has conditioned us as a society to start to assume that AI will do this, that AI can do this, that it's inevitable that AI will become self-aware and become computers on its own. And
Skynet.
Yeah, right. Or, they'll either be friendly like Data or homicidal like Skynet. And it's like, I don't know that we're going to ever have either. And maybe that's for the best. Maybe humans should remain alone at the top of the sentience heap.
Yeah, and like war games, I mean, you really need the human decision. Yeah. That's got to be there.
The human element. Yes, that was last week's discussion about autonomous weapon systems. Where I
missed that one.
Yeah. Oh, we talked a lot about. We've kind of been on this kick talking about AI and in various ways, and there's always going to be a human in the loop, because it's fundamentally. We are fundamental to at least this world. There's, depending on if there's intelligence on other planets, that's a whole nother discussion for Jimmy Akin's Mysterious World. But at least for our world, fundamentals. Humans are fundamental to the way things are here, the way things are done here, I guess is what I'm saying. So, it's keep us in the loop. Yeah. So very good. It was a good discussion. So folks, if you have thoughts and opinions on this, and if you get a chance to use any of these AI generators, we'd love to see your work. So you could actually post them in our Discord community at sqpn.com/Discord. Throw them in the Secrets of Technology channel there and show us what works you create in collaboration with an AI. I'll throw some of mine in there that I've did in preparation for this show, and let us see what you do. But also give us your opinions. What do you think about these topics about AI and creativity and human beings as part of that? So love to hear from you. All right. Before we move on to our next segment, I want to take a moment to thank our patrons who make it possible for us to create The Secrets of Technology, including Joshua P., Cole S., Matthew D., Father Joseph S., and Petru. Their generous donations at sqpn.com/give make it possible for us to continue The Secrets of Technology and all the shows at StarQuest, and you can join them by visiting sqpn.com/give. And all of our sponsors, all of our patrons are not AI. They're actual human beings. So that's very important. All right, let's move on to talk about some headlines. So one thing we talked about a while ago on this show is dark patterns. Pat, you familiar with dark patterns?
No, I didn't get a chance to dive into that article.
So let me quickly recap what dark patterns are. Dark patterns are the ways that certain websites or businesses or other even non-websites, just software, use ways to kind of nudge us to taking an action that the maker or the controller of that website or whatever it is want us to do. So, for example, every time you see a pop-up and there's a big button that says, do this thing, and it's clearly the thing that they want you to do, and then the other option to not do that thing is very tiny and small and written in very light type below it, that's a dark pattern. So dark patterns are ways that they use to manipulate us into taking a particular path or taking particular action in software. And there's a great website. What is it? Dark Patterns. .org, I think it is, that gives all the examples. Let me see here. Deceptive.design. That's what it is. So if you check out deceptive.design, you'll see all kinds of examples of dark patterns, and they even have the Hall of Shame, which is really a lot of fun to go through because you'll recognize different ones there. So anyway, the article that brought up for this headline, Amazon has agreed to drop dark patterns that it's been using in Europe for people who wanted to cancel Amazon Prime. And they've agreed to simplify the process required for canceling its Prime membership subscription service across its sites in the European Union on desktop and mobile. And because there's been a lot of complaints from consumer protection groups. Yeah, I mean, it's good to see that the EU has taken some action here, because it can become a problem. Now, if you're a relatively savvy, computer user, you can work your way through it. But there are lots of people who, especially older folks who just are not comfortable with technology, who just have a hard time navigating these interfaces. In fact, not even that much older. My wife Melanie was having trouble today trying to work through our pediatrician's website is just full of these weird flows that it really feels like a dark pattern designed to not keep you from bothering them, because we need forms for camp for the kids and that sort of stuff. And it's like, we had these specific questions, and it was like, it was hidden, like the place to go. And it was just she was just having such trouble. And I had to okay, just stop. Let me look at your computer and walk you through the process. And it's unnecessarily difficult, and sometimes intentionally so. So, yeah, they said that the cancellation process was previously a multi-layered, friction-filled cancellation dance, and it has been simplified to a 2-click cancellation process.
I see this all the time with my older clients, where I've been called in to help them cancel X, Y, or Z, and a lot of things you can sign up on a website and there's no way to cancel it via a website. You must call them, and you get these runarounds. And
retention specialists.
It's really awful, because it means that they lose money, they're stressed, they're really upset. And then, of course, there's all the scams that are out there telling them that they need to go do this type of stuff, and they're not real.
Right.
And so it's a real serious issue.
Yeah, I've mentioned several times before, I use a service called privacy.com to create alias or proxy credit cards. So it's connected to my bank account, but I can use these are like special like numbers. It's got the credit card number and expiration and the CVV code. And what I can do is I can set it up to be used only in one particular place, and they can have limits of dollar amount or time or whatever. And the great thing about it is, if I want to cancel a service and it's way too much hassle to cancel, I just can't kill the card. They can't charge me for it anymore.
Well, I have heard of situations where people said, well, my card's expired, it's no problem, but the bills keep mounting up. And I've had a couple of people get things like they're going to be threatened to take it to a collection agency.
That would be for something like, that's like a service, a subscription service or something like that.
Right, exactly.
Where you're getting a service, yeah.
Yeah, not a product, because once you've got it, it's done.
Right.
But it would be a subscription type thing. Well, they said, well, or a membership. And they said, well, we'll just let it cancel. And somebody else said, no, I've gotten some, dunning notices because I haven't paid my bill for X amount of time.
Yeah, gyms are an example of this in the real world, like where you sign up for a gym membership and it becomes. In fact, there was a famous episode of Friends, I think it was, where Joey and Chandler wouldn't cancel their gym membership because they always had a beautiful girl who was the one you had to go to cancel, and she'd be all like, "Oh, don't you want to keep coming to the gym? And don't you want to look buff and strong?" That's the sort of things. Like anyone who's ever had to tried to cancel a cable service or something like that, they're the worst. Oh my gosh, they're the worst. I remember when I switched from Comcast to Verizon years ago, and it was just such a hassle. I hate to do it again.
What's funny is just this week I had a copy of Fantasy and Science Fiction. No, it was Analog magazine from several years ago, and there was a short story called Retention, and it's this whole thing about somebody calling in to say they want to cancel the subscription and all this type of thing, and it goes round and round, and it ends up being the person who is, calling to cancel is really an AI, is just the remnants of a person left over in an automated home, and they have no way of canceling the service because they never get to the clinch line of yes, okay, well, you can cancel.
Oh wow!
This hilarious story.
Yeah, two AIs battling it out in opposite directions.
Exactly, and it never resolved.
That is funny. That is funny. So our next headline is another interesting one. This one has to do with smart homes, and the headline this is from Cornell University that has done a study, and they found that smart thermostats, like your Nest or Ecobee or other ones like that, smart thermostats are inadvertently straining the electric power grids. And what they did was they did a study of winter power use. And they found that in the winter, a lot of these thermostats are turning on the heat at like 6 a.m. just before people get, waking up. And that's causing a peak demand on the electric grid and causing problems. Peak demands are bad. And what they found is that most people, when they install a smart thermostat or get one installed, because a lot of times these are being installed for them by utilities and stuff, they don't know how to program them. They're too complicated. Even now, even the ones that have an app that you can get into, they're still too complicated. And so they're all set to the defaults, and the defaults are usually things like 6 a.m. And, they're the same one on every thermostat, your neighbor, everyone in town, that sort of thing. And so it's causing peak demands. Now, I should point a couple to the things that are true for this. It's mainly a problem because of electric heating. So many of us in the Northeast, like here in New England, most people don't have electric heat. They have oil or gas heat still, just the way it works here. But I'd also point out this would also be a problem in the summer with air conditioning. It's the same problem, just different directions. But it's really a problem with people being able to program their smart home stuff. It's still too complicated. Pat, do you have a smart thermostat in your home, or you still get the old-fashioned kind?
We have an upstairs and a downstairs unit. The one downstairs is a smart thermostat that was subsidized by our electric company, and the one upstairs is an older, kind of a programmable, one. Mm-hmm. That's the one I have problems trying to get it reset after a power failure. Oh, because I'm a techie, and everything I go through and try and do, and I come back and it's wrong again. and so it's like, I understand my clients just can't figure this stuff out, especially if there's an app. I've had a couple of people that couldn't get cable service or couldn't get a Ring doorbell or something like that because they don't have a smartphone. Right. And they've had to go out and buy an iPad or something like that just to deal with this stuff and have me come over and set it up. Right. Yeah, but even for those of us who are techies, this stuff is not necessarily even straightforward. Like the stuff, the Nests and Ecobees now are miles above the old programmable thermostats. That's for sure. I mean, when I was a kid, we had the old Mercury one where you just turn it hot or cold. And my dad would be always like, stop turning it, turn it down. But then they had the electronic programmable ones, but they were more of an analog electronic programmable. They weren't, fully digital like they are now. But even these new digital interfaces, they're not good. I mean, they just like the Nest, just to get into the Nest, it takes me like 5 steps, and it's slow. And it kind of frustrates me a little bit because when I was younger, when you had the old Mercury ones,
you could walk over and turn it. You know what I mean? Now you have to have the app, open up, unlock your phone. You can still walk over and turn it. I should point out, you can still walk over and change it, but programming these things, it's still bad. And a lot of this home automation stuff is still not good enough. It's still not mainstream. I just got a few new. We're gonna do another smart home episode where we'll talk about update on some smart home stuff. But I got a few new smart home things in, and it took me way longer than it should have to set up a few things. Like I got water leak sensors, and I got a vibration sensor. I set it up so that every time the delivery box out front by my front door opens, I get an alert, which is kind of cool. Except when the kids play with it, and then my phone's explodes with notifications. But that's a whole nother problem. But it was way too much trouble too hard to set these things up.
And for techies.
Even for techies. Right. There's not enough thought being put into the interfaces. That's a big issue.
Well, and none of them are standard. I mean, it's like there's every app, every company is different in the way that they present it, or they display it, or they set it. Mm-hmm. And Google's probably the better of the ones out there that I've had to deal with. Yeah. But still, when I have to go out and set up somebody's home internet system that's using the Google Mesh, theirs is better than some of the others I've tried to set up, but still, it's I've had to go back and reset things and try again because it didn't work the first time.
I hope that comes to the Nest stuff, because that has not been as good. They need to really improve the Nest stuff. Even just setting up like the Nest smoke detectors. There was once one that I had that I just could not get it to be recognized by the app. It works as a smoke detector, so if smoke goes off, but it's not connected to the app, so it doesn't have all of the smart functions, like being able to remotely silence and all this sort of stuff. That was the whole point of it. And I ended up just totally resetting it, taking it down, taking the battery out, I guess, and
starting all over again.
Yeah, just resetting the thing to factory and starting it. But even then, it's just too much hassle. So I agree, and so these things have bigger implications, which is it's causing grid problems. And so maybe because it's causing those bigger problems, it'll be enough to get these companies to start to fix it, so that, so it's not just if some non-techies are having problems programming it, it's no big deal. No, it is a big deal because it's causing problems to these big utilities. Interesting to think about.
Maybe there's a whole new industry of people that have jobs that do nothing but go out and program people's smart home stuff.
Well, there is. And in fact, one of our sponsors for Jimmy Akin's Mysterious World is Aaron Ferguson, Electric on Automation. I mean, his job is he does home automation. He goes from, they're usually on the higher end, of course, but there could be people who do, just regular, what's the
tech support,
tech support, mama nerd sort of tech support sort of stuff, where you go to people's homes that just help average folks.
I'm doing a lot of it, but there's not very any more than me.
Right. Yeah, maybe it's a nice business for someone to get into if they're interested in that sort of thing. They like people and helping people with that sort of thing. Speaking of the electric power grid, our last headline is I thought this was interesting and timely. So it says 1,500 Tesla Powerwall owners have already joined a new virtual power plant in California. I say timely because Tesla put my solar panels back on my roof today after being down for over a month. Yeah,
wow.
We had to take them down in order to repair the roof. When they put them up a few years ago, they actually damaged my roof, and it was a huge thing. And we ended up having to have a settlement, and I had to have my whole roof redone. Yeah, there were leaks, and I'm glad that we're nearing the end of this saga. Hopefully they're up there and they didn't re-damage the roof putting them back up. whole nother conversation for another episode of something. But this is interesting because the Tesla Powerwall is a battery. Basically, it's like the battery that they put in the cars, but it's a battery that hangs on the wall of your house, and you charge it, and then your house can run off of it. You can use it as a backup to your house's power. So if the grid goes out, you can run off the battery. If you have solar panels, the panels can charge it and run off the battery, at night when the panels aren't getting electricity, that sort of thing. So there's an interesting aspect to it where a lot of these power walls have way more capacity than the homes use. They're storing all this energy, but it's just sitting there. So utilities have come up with this idea, along with Tesla, to create virtual power plants. And what these are basically distributed batteries, distributed energy storage systems that are smart and communicate to a central place that they can draw on when there's peak demand, just what we were talking about, like peak demand. So, for example, there was like these rolling blackouts in California last year, I think it was, or the year before, during the summer, when there was so much demand on the grid that they had to turn parts of it off because they couldn't provide enough power. And yet they realized there was all this power just sitting unused in a lot of the batteries backups, especially in the power walls. So they have, they said on June 22nd, Tesla invited about 25,000 Pacific Gas and Electric customers with power walls to join the virtual power plant. And they had more than 3,000 expressed interest in enrolling, and they started a pilot program with 1,500 customers officially in the program. And you think, how much power could that possibly generate? Well, actually quite a lot. They said that with an average of 2 power walls per customer, the VPP, virtual power plant, most likely already has a 13 megawatt load capacity. That's a lot. And they eventually say that Powerwall owners can eventually receive $2 per kilowatt hour that they send back to the grid during emergency events, which is a good bit of money. When you have solar plants, panels, when you generate excess electricity, the electric companies are required to buy it back from you as a credit on your power bill. But $2 is actually pretty good. I'm pretty sure. I think I didn't actually look it up what we're getting here in Massachusetts, but I think $2 is pretty good. So what do you think, Pat? Is this something you would do? Would this encourage you to get something like a Powerwall?
Probably not us at our age in our place. Yeah. But I could see where, somebody that has a lot more invested in solar power or in these power walls, that it sounds good, because I know other people that do have a situation like you're talking about where they're selling their electricity back to the city or to wherever they're living. And so this is an extension of that. And I think it's a great idea. It's not going to turn me at this moment in my life.
Yeah, it's not for everybody, I think. I mean, this is one of the benefits of our solar system is in the summer, we generate way more electricity from our panels than we'll use. So we build up this huge credit. So we pay nothing for electricity in the summer. We do pay a lease on the panels, but it's still less than half of what we were paying for electricity in the past. But then we build up this huge credit that we then work off through the winter when there's less daylight, of course. So we're generating less electricity, and so it balances out. But I love this idea. We don't actually have a battery backup system with our solar, but I would love to have a battery backup. Right now, I have a generator that I have to haul out if the power goes out and manually plug, the fridge into and that sort of thing. But I've always thought it would be a really great idea to have a battery backup on the solar system.
Oh, yeah.
To do that sort of thing. And I like the idea of those batteries being useful for the whole grid. The solar panels are already a way of generating power for the grid. This is another way of everyone working together to provide power to the grid without having to centralize all of our power generation. So I kind of like it.
Yeah.
So, all right. So that does it for our headlines. So let's go to our picks of the week. And Pat, let's hear from you. What is your pick this week?
Well, it's similar to one that I think I talked about somewhere around a year ago, taking old computers and making them something still useful. And the previous one I did was something called Cloud Ready, which tried to make a PC. I don't think it ever came out for Mac, but to turn it into something like a Chromebook, which would run the Chrome browser and be that platform. Well, Google has actually now come out with their own OS Flex, which is Google's way to turn a PC into a Chromebook. And the only thing that I've found that it can't do so far, and I've put one through its paces on a couple of machines, it can't run Android apps. And so there are some things that it doesn't have a Play Store that you can go get an Android app to run X, Y, and Z. So, for instance, there's a version of Zoom that you can run in the browser. There was on real Chromebooks, you could download the Zoom that ran on Android and run that when you can't here, because it's strictly just the web-based version. They did have a Chrome-based version before, but they announced this week that they are no longer going to support the Chrome-based extension to run Zoom. You have to just run it in the browser, and because they don't have the Play Store Android version available.
Right.
Well, there was something called something PWB, something web interface or something, but PWA, I think it was, powered web apps. They do not have that for OS Flex, where you can run those on a real Chromebook. But basically, I can install LastPass, I can run Chrome, I can run Google Docs, I can run the Microsoft Office suite from the website and open up, Microsoft Word documents, Excel documents, etc. I can install Dropbox, I can use Google Drive. There's a lot of stuff available that most people could get some value out of an older machine, especially old laptops, and still, be something that's familiar, as opposed to dropping back to a Linux, which I like Ubuntu and I like some of the others, but it's a little far for some of my older people. But a Chromebook, works for a lot of them.
Yeah, and this will work on older PCs and Macs, so it'll work on both.
Yeah, I haven't tested out the Mac one yet, but I would like to do that next because rather than running Linux on the Mac, I think this would be the way to go for most of my clients.
Yeah, we've talked a lot about reusing, getting new life out of older computers and keeping them running, and often that's been we've talked about various flavors of Linux and Mint, Linux Mint, I think it is.
Ubuntu Mint and Cinnamon Mint, and there's a whole bunch of different flavors of it. Right,
but it's all Linux, which means that there's at some point it's all got that Linux trickiness that you've got to get over at some point. Whereas Chrome OS is it's if you know how to use a web browser, you pretty much got it. And so the lack of Zoom is a big hit, though. That's
a native Zoom. I mean, as I say, you can use the web version of, and for my clients, that's fine. But for people who are needing to have all the tools that the full blown one, that's not enough. But they're not going to be the Chromebook users anyway.
Yeah, your granddaughter has a Chromebook that when that changes, that the whole Zoom thing changes, it's going to prevent her from using that Chromebook for her classes, her online classes. So she's going to have to be. I got her a Mac Mini, so she can use that, but she's not as mobile as she once was, and that's a real shame, because otherwise it works. The Chromebook is several years old. It still works. Just
I wonder if we could install Flex OS on that old Chromebook.
I wonder if it says PC and Macs. I'm curious whether you could do it to the installer would work on a Chromebook. That would be something we'd have to consider. That would be.
It probably won't, knowing Google, but it would be nice if it did.
Yeah, it would be.
It would save a lot of things going into the landfill.
Right. On the other hand, there are a lot of old computers that would work just fine, stuff that you can get for a pretty decent price.
I've got this older laptop that one of my clients had that's only got 4 gigs of memory, and it's several years old, and it's got a real small hard drive. But the Chrome Flex OS runs really nice on it.
Oh, that's awesome. I'm gonna have to dig into that a little more. I've got. I don't have any old laptops other than the Chromebook that or old computers. Actually, I've got an old 2010 era iMac here. I don't really have room to put it up anywhere. That's the problem.
Yeah.
But that might work pretty well. I also have a 2019 iMac, which worked great. I just have no room to set them up anywhere.
Right. Yeah. Well, you might have to farm that out to somebody else to do the research for you.
Exactly. Yeah. All right. So my pick this week is a very simple little piece of software called Mission Control Plus. And it does one thing very well. So Mission Control is a function within Mac OS where you can have certain gestures to bring up either all of the windows that are open on your computer and all the apps tiled across the screen in front of you, so you can pick from them, or all the windows in one app you can find and select and work between them. What Mission Control Plus does is very simple. It gives you keyboard navigation and shortcuts. So one thing it does is it will put a little close button on all the windows, so that when you hover over the window, you'll see this close button pop up, and you can close the window from Mission Control. That's not something that Apple had built into it previously. It also will give you, I'm trying to pull it up here, keyboard shortcuts that you can use when you're in the Mission Control area. Things like quit that app that's highlighted, close window, minimize window, open a window, that sort of thing. So it's a very simple little bit of productivity that you're doing. It's not complex. It doesn't have extensive. That's it. That's all the features. But it's a neat little feature that makes using that Mission Control feature in on the Mac just a little bit easier. So I like it.
Cool.
And it's $9 if you buy it outright. But if you use SetApp, the software subscription service, it's included, so no additional cost for that. So another reason to subscribe to SetApp. I was skeptical of SetApp at first. I've become a big fan. I have a lot of software that I use from SetApp. Yeah, so it's worth the price. Very good. So that should do it for us this time. We would love to hear what you think of anything we discussed today. You can let us know by commenting on the show at sqpn.com/technology or the StarQuest Facebook page at facebook.com/StarQuestMedia, or send an email to technology@sqpn.com, or visit the StarQuest Discord community at sqpn.com/Discord. You'll find links from our discussion and our picks of the week on our show notes at sqpn.com. Remember to like each episode of Secrets of Tech where you find it on Facebook, or retweet it on Twitter where we're at SQPN. Leave us comments. We'd love to hear from you. We'd like to thank James for his research assistance in this episode. One of these days I'm going to say that right. Research assistance. I stumble over
yeses.
every time. I need to rephrase that. But thank you, James. Until next time, Pat Scott, thank you for joining me and sharing the secrets of technology.
It's always fun to be here.
And once again, I'm Dom Bettinelli. Thank you for listening to the Secrets of Technology on StarQuest.